So this is my new scale, reloading scale. It's an RCBS model 1010. I wanted to get an electronic scale, but as I did more research and read reviews, I discovered that really the one that would be of the quality that I would want, that would be consistent and respond quickly and maintain at zero and just be excellent quality, was more than I wanted to pay. In the range of $1,000 to $1,500. So I decided to go with a traditional balance beam scale. I guess this is called, this type of scale. It's just a typical powder scale used for reloading, that style. This one had good reviews, and it was relatively expensive for a traditional kind of scale. So we'll see how it works, and let's open it up and see what we have. Got some plastic to protect it during shipping. And let's just flip it over here. Got some instructions. So there we have it. We got a powder bowl, or I'm not sure what that's called. Let's see. Take a quick look at the instructions here. It's called a pan, so I guess the plastic's probably just to protect the scale when it's not being used. Let's see. The beam with the weight. Not sure why we've got a... Oh, I guess so. We have a couple different pans we could use, I guess. Or maybe this pan just goes in that pan. I don't know. We'll see. So the beam plus these two guys plus the frame. That's everything. And this is probably a weight for calibration. It's got a little conversion chart. So the quality feels okay. New Jersey, USA. It looks like it was made. Looks like a casting with the typical RCBS finish sprayed on there. Zero mark for the balance beam. So here is the instruction manual, and you can see it points out the parts. The attachment weight, and what that is, that's the lower left there. That's actually a knob that helps to adjust the level, or it helps to level the scale, and it holds a weight that you can use to increase the capacity of the scale. I'll get into that later. Dial plate, beam pointer, that's just where you tell if it's zeroed out or not. Damper vane, and there's a couple magnets I think in there that help to dampen out the movement so you can measure more quickly. Large poise, I'm not sure what that is. Beam, that's obvious. Beam bearings, to give smooth movement, help it not to stick, and therefore it can be a little more precise. Micrometer poise. So those, I guess those are just the adjustments where you adjust the weight, the poise. End loop, that's just where you hang the thing that you're weighing. Pan support assembly. Pan, and like I showed you, it comes with a couple different pans. And the base assembly. So those are the different parts of the scale. And I'll shoot pictures of those actual parts in just a moment. So this is the overview of the scale. This 1010 model has a capacity of 510 grains, and like I said before, you can add that weight to increase the capacity. It's got a, well, basically an accurate way to weigh and to do it quickly. Special approach to weight system. I'm not sure what that is. I'll figure that out and share that with you. Magnetic dampener, which I mentioned, and I'll get a shot of that. It says it's guaranteed to 1/10 of a grain, so that's as accurate as I could possibly need, I think, for powder measurements. Agate bearings. I'll get a shot of those. Again, those will just smooth out the movement and help it not stick, thus helping it be precise. And as the scale shipped, you saw that you could store the pan and the weight and those things within the scale itself for convenience. Manufactured by Ohaus. I think they've been around quite a while, and you can see it's there in New Jersey, as is cast into the bottom of the scale. This is a close-up of the left end of the beam, and that big piece of copper is part of the damping system of the scale. Here's what the instructions say about that. The scale is equipped with magnetic damping, which causes the beam to come to rest quickly without affecting sensitivity or accuracy. It operates on the principle of a permanent magnetic field resisting the motion of a non-magnetic copper damper vane attached to the beam. So that copper is the damper vane. The pole faces of the damping magnets are positioned on both sides of the wide slot that the damper vane travels in when the beam is in place. So let me give you a close-up of those magnets. The magnets, which there are two that are on each side of this copper when the beam is in place, and they just damp the movement of the scale to make readings come to rest much more quickly. There's a close-up on two of the magnets. I'm pointing the camera toward the left end of the scale into the slot where the damper vane rides, and those would be the two magnets toward the back of the scale, and on the left, just behind the green metal there, you can't see them, there are two more that face these two, and the copper damper vane rides up and down in between those two sets of magnets. So that's a close-up of one of the agate bearings on which the beam rides. This is the right end of the scale, or of the beam, sits in these bearings, and that's one of them. And that should provide for real smooth movement of the beam and prevent binding, which will allow more precise measurement. So the beam is very easy to install in the scale. You just put the damper vane and the beam pointer in there and lower the right end down into the bearings there, and voila, it's in place. So when we were looking at this earlier, I was trying to remove this. It doesn't come out, it's permanent. And if you listen, it's got some weights in there. So this arm and this gizmo with the weights in it are meant as part of what's necessary for you to have a balanced zero setting on the scale. When you place this in here as well, that's part of what you need, the pan, to zero the scale out. So if we just hang this on the hook right there on the end, let me scoot this over a little bit. So we've got a hook on the right end of the beam. We just hang this here, and that's part of what's necessary to zero the scale out. Now, the scale has 3 feet, 1 foot here, and another one just like it in back, and then the tip of this guy, and so it's a tripod basically, so it's pretty easy to level. You can see the scale is not quite reading 0 here. This needs to be level for this to read 0. With these guys attached on the right end here, if this is level, this should read 0. So all we do is screw this foot in, and you can see the 0 is getting closer and closer to the beam pointer. Basically the beam itself doesn't move when I move this guy, or almost doesn't move at all. So I'll just raise the left end of the scale until those are in line. Now it's zeroed, real easy. This guy, this is a 500 grain weight, and it just gets stored right there. If I need to weigh anything that's more than 500 grains, I can just hang this guy right here, and that'll increase the capacity of the scale by 500 grains. I can't imagine when I'll ever need that, but I can if I want to. Now, this is the large poise, and these increments are 10 grains. So I'm going to start out by loading a round for 308, or develop a 308 load, and I'm going to start with 43.5 grains. Since this goes just in 10 grain increments, I'm just going to go, so that first notch is 10, 20, 30, 40. Now, for more precision, you adjust this micrometer poise at this end, and I'll get a little close-up shot of that and explain how that works. So this is the micrometer poise. So once I've gotten the large poise to the nearest tenth, or 10 grain increment, in my case I'm doing 43.5 grains, so it's on 40, then I'll add the last 3.5 grains here. You can see on this large scale here, you've got up to 10 grains you can add. If you need to add 10, then obviously you need to go to the large poise and just bump it over by one notch. But less than 10 is where you'll come here and add that. And this is just a little lock screw, so if you tighten that down gently, it locks the micrometer poise in place, so you don't bump it if you're doing a lot of measuring. I'll loosen it, and now with your thumb you can just spin the micrometer poise. That's 1/10 of a grain, 2/10. So this, if I spin this one revolution back to the zero, you can see I've gone to the first notch right there, the first marking. That's 1 grain. Now watch this line over here. That's 2 grains. 3 grains. I'm at the zero right here, so that's exactly 3. 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10. So I've got 40 on the large poise. I'm just past the 3rd notch there, so that's 3 more grains, and another half. Now I'll lock this in place. Now I'm set up to measure 43.5 grains of powder. So whenever I get 43.5 grains of powder in the pan here, the pointer on the beam should line up with the 0. This is my Harrell's Culver Classic powder measure. This will be my first time using it, so I'm going to try to adjust it to throw 43.5 grains of powder. I'll use my new RCBS 1010 scale to verify when I've reached that amount. And I'll just keep adjusting this scale here until it's consistently throwing 43.5 grains of powder. We'll see how consistently and how well this powder measure works. So I'll be putting Reloader 15 powder in the measure. Pretty good. I'm getting a teeny tiny bit of variation between drops, probably less than 1/10, which is probably close enough for my shooting skills. So this balance is pretty good. It's really easy to put together. There's basically nothing to that. It's easy to dial in the weight that you want to measure, and it seems to do a pretty consistent job measuring, and the beam comes to rest pretty quickly. So I think for non-electronic, that costs less than $1,000 or $1,500, seems like a really great solution. The hardest part is just taking your time and weighing out a number of batches of powder that you've dispensed from your measure until you hone in on the correct adjustment for the measure. That just takes a few minutes, and I think this is going to work just fine.